I would like to call to order the Henry County Board of Education special call meeting on August 31st, 2020. And I would just like to make a note that you will see that Ms. Cobb is not with us physically today, but she is joining us virtually. So we do have all 5 members present for this meeting. And I'll now turn it over to our superintendent for Section B, informational items, back to school 2020 planning update. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and our Henry County community who is able to tune in today. Pleased to bring to the Board of Education informational item B1, our Back to School 2020 planning update. I will be sharing this presentation with Valerie Sue Smith and Brian Blanton, and we will have a pause for discussion between each one of our sections of the presentation, if that's to the board's pleasure. But as I begin, we are really here 1 week after the Board of Education reviewed a framework for a gradual and staggered return to our school campuses. And during that conversation, there was consensus among the Board of Education members that there was a desire to see a time frame applied to that gradual and staggered framework, as well as a reconvening of this Board of Education to review a more in-depth, more in-depth return plan. So today, myself and members of the Executive Cabinet have prepared that plan for the board's review and discussion and have associated a timeline with that plan. But if I could, I'd like to walk through, for the purpose of this discussion, the plan that can be found on the district website in our board member meetings area where there's agenda items. And so let's go ahead and talk through some of this. Now, you all know that we have been planning the back-to-school season really since the end of the last school year. And in doing so, we always knew we needed to prepare for 2 scenarios. The first was an option of families being able to choose on-campus or remote learning. And the second was a fully virtual start. Now, it was in July, the middle of July, July 17th, that the board convened when the COVID cases actually had its highest peak, and the Board of Education determined at that time the responsible way to start would be fully virtually. But since then, we've always known, and our language has always included, that there would be a delayed on-campus start to have discussion around, and that delayed on-campus start would always be accompanied by the option for remote learning as an alternative. So we really looked at this particular slide in our meeting last week. And before we got to this slide, we had a very comprehensive review of all of the preparations that have been in place in our organization to prepare for the opening of school campuses. I was not intending to repeat any of that previous presentation, but if any viewer was unable to see that, I would highly recommend looking at the details that were outlined regarding the mitigating efforts that have been taken in each one of our school campuses, not only through the physical adaptations of our facilities, but also through the protocols, processes, and routines that have been recreated in each of our schools so that we are mitigating and taking precautions as recommended by public health officials. So this framework was provided to the Board of Education. This is where we had most of our discussion, and this discussion, in return, there was a request for dates to be placed by that. So, of course, not only do I want to talk through those dates, but also the depth in which the planning had to occur. So this is the first page of a 3-page document that is available on the district website, and it's the comprehensive plan to returning to an on-campus learning option for our students with a timeline. But I'm going to break down every single box you see on this plan in the following moments of my presentation so that we are not just looking at a tiny font on a screen right now. So what I'm going to start with is September 14th, which is our transition into phase 1. By September 14th, this will be an opportunity for all of our remaining employees to return to the work site. And in order to do so, some employees will be permitted, all employees will be permitted to bring their school-age children to the school campus. And of course, there's going to be a lot of conversation about the employment options that exist for employees here in Henry County Schools. We have been the most accommodating district as we've started this school year, and we will continue to talk about the options our employees have as we transition into on-campus learning for a portion of our students. There'll actually be a section following my presentation with Ms. Sue Smith, our Chief HR Officer, to really articulate the details of that return to work process. Now, in this phase one, we will still have all of our students participating in remote learning. And you will also note that the gradual opening of our school campuses is articulated and the gradual opening of our district facilities. By this date, we note in this plan that board members will meet in the boardroom, as we have been doing, and public access to the board meeting will be on site and available with advanced registration so we can manage the total capacity. We will, of course, continue to do a live teleconference, or a live broadcast option as well. Okay, so phase two starts on September 28th. You may recall September 20th is the week of fall break. We plan on honoring the week of fall break for our families, our students, and our employees. But phase two is September 28th. This is the real gradual start for our students to being on campus. This will be an orientation period for students. And we will actually divide the PK through 12, so that's our pre-K, kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade, by last name. Last names A through M will be Monday and Tuesday. Last names N through Z will be Thursday and Friday. And our pre-K through 12th grade students that are served in self-contained programs will actually be on campus, invited to be back on campus Monday through Friday, starting that week. Now, all other days for the students who have a split week will be a remote learning or independent learning activities. I'll continue to mention that the gradual opening of our school campuses and gradual opening of our district facilities now will remain unchanged as we proceed through each one of our phases. Phase 3 begins on October 5th. This is when all employees are, of course, continuing to report to the worksite, and it's the gradual return of students to on-campus learning. This is where our pre-K through 5 will go Monday through Friday for the whole week, typical hours. Our grades 6 through 8 will go Monday through Friday, the whole week, typical hours. But our 9 through 12 students will function on a split schedule with students with the last name A through M on campus on Monday and Tuesday, and students with the last name N through Z will be on campus Thursday and Friday. Wednesday will be a remote learning day for all students, and the other days where you're not on campus will be a remote learning day for you as a student. We will continue to have our pre-K through 12 students who are served in self-contained program areas on campus Monday through Friday. Now we will continue our school and district facility model. Now, phase 4 is on a date yet to be determined. And Judy, if you don't mind advancing that slide, that would be great. And on this phase 4, all of our employees continue to report to the worksite. And this date is yet to be determined because we will actually evaluate the COVID conditions as the weeks progress to determine the date and time that all high school students can be on campus at the same time. And so I do see that there is an error in the slide, but in the actual report, this is 9-12 students on campus the full week. And our pre-K through 12 students will, of course, stay the full week. Now, the actual plan with dates has been accompanied by a narrative, and the narrative is significant in creating the context in which our organization is capable of successfully and responsibly returning to on-campus learning as an option for our families. So as everyone knows, and this will not change, families in Henry County Schools will have the option to choose remote learning or on-campus learning for the 2020-21 school year. And the gradual and staggered return that I've just articulated is only applicable to students who have chosen for the on-campus learning. Now, families who opt for the remote learning will continue to engage in that remote learning at home. And this transition from fully remote to the hybrid of options could cause some uncustomary and unusual transitions midway through the first 9 weeks of a student's school year. It could result in some scheduling adjustments that will be necessary and customized by the local school. Now, I'll also mention that if any of our numbers require our reevaluation of whether an elementary or middle school would require a split schedule, we would address that as the conditions warrant. As of right now, that is not anticipated. Of course, there's a family selection into remote learning, and that has not changed. That families will have that option, but we will have a second selection window. If you don't mind advancing the slide, that would be great. The second selection window will be from August 31st to September 9th. This will actually invite all families to make their selection again. The selection made in July will no longer be the selection we can rely on for the upcoming weeks of returning to campus. So we do invite you to visit that selection window again. You'll receive some information at the conclusion of this presentation shared by Dr. Blanton on exactly how to do that, but that window will start this evening. Now, I do want to mention that we get a lot of questions about whether once I make my choice, am I locked into that choice forever? Or how long am I locked into that choice? And we understand that this is a season and a year to be flexible and agile. We know our families and our community are offering us that grace, and this is not a time to be concerned that you cannot make a transition if at any given point your context or circumstances require that. Also, our evening remote learning program will continue to be an option. So any child who is enrolled in the evening remote learning and would like to remain there is welcome to do so, and we will also be accepting any additional students if there's an interest in enrolling in the evening program if there are spaces made available by students exiting. So our next piece of context is our on-campus requirements. This is applicable to students who opt into the on-campus learning environment. They are also committing to our COVID-19 mitigating protocols that are in place. Masks will be required in Henry County schools on buses and on Henry County schools campuses. Exceptions could be applied for students' special circumstances, and those will be handled on a case-by-case basis. And local schools may be determining mask-down zones for specific activities, such as eating and drinking, or during physical activity or certain instructional settings. Now, we do expect that masks will comply with the dress code standards outlined in the Code of Conduct. And once students return to campus, there will also be an opportunity to learn all of the school-specific routines that have been redesigned to mitigate interaction with any possible spread of the COVID-19. So you'll see hallway directional signs. We'll ask students to avoid crowding, and we will ask students to stay home if they do not feel well or if they have had a COVID positive diagnosis. So students who do not comply with those on-campus efforts could be encouraged to transition into remote learning, or could be in violation of the Code of Conduct if that is not followed. So as we move on to our COVID-19 conditions, our entire return to campus is dependent on the COVID-19 conditions in our community. And we have worked actually really well with our local medical professionals, particularly our pediatricians and our executives at Piedmont Henry Hospital. And in collaboration with both of those entities, along with the Department of Public Health, we have also been engaged in researching how and what other districts and cities across this country are doing in order to monitor the COVID-19 risk and conditions of its community. There are references at the conclusion of this presentation to see the most relied upon resources that have come to the attention of our district and the decision-making efforts that we have placed. But what you will see is there are 4 key health metrics that the district will be monitoring and updating on the district website on a weekly basis, and monitoring bi-weekly to determine if the instructional model being offered is best aligned with the COVID conditions at that time. We will be looking at the new positive cases in Henry County over a 14-day period. This will be the indicator of community infection rates. We will also be looking at the new positive cases daily average over a 14-day period. This is also an indicator of community infection rate and is highly linked to the Harvard Research Review that is recommending that as a key indicator for the conditions of a community. We will also work with Piedmont Henry regarding hospitalization. This is in an attempt to have an indicator of the severity of the virus and the capacity of our medical community to manage the health of the community. We will collaborate on a weekly basis and evaluate the hospitalization rates for our community. And once school is back in session, we will evaluate transmission rates per school. This would be the number of COVID positive cases that are in a school relative to the transmission rate of the community in which the school resides. We will, of course, want the transmission rate of the school to be lower or equal to the transmission rate of the community in which it resides, and should it exceed that, it would give us a reason to evaluate the condition of that school. So I do want to mention that new positive cases in Henry County and the hospitalizations are the two key factors that we are looking at right now. And I'm going to show you some of the recent data that is available to review, and it was also posted on our website. But as we move back to on campus, there will be no one metric in isolation that will tell the whole story, because there is no one medical professional that has come into complete agreement about the only one metric that matters when making decisions. So we will deploy a matrix of metrics in order to evaluate the conditions of our community, and we will also take responsibility for our role in mitigating community spread. Okay, so of course, there is a lot of interest in the response to a positive case on a school campus and the quarantine protocol for Henry County schools. This is all outlined and available on the district website in the district playbook on COVID-19 positive response, and it was presented at last Monday's meeting in its entirety. But in summary, I will say that we will, of course, be responsible for reporting any positive case that we learn of to the Department of Public Health. And in coordination with the Department of Public Health, we will actually execute our COVID-19 positive protocol. That starts with an interview of the individual who has reported a positive diagnosis. And in that interview, we will learn of any instance in which there was an individual less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes and identify that person as a close contact to the positive diagnosis person. All close contacts in Henry County schools will be notified by phone call. And after those phone calls are complete, a notification to the entire campus will be sent via the Infinite Campus Messenger system. It's a good little moment to be conscious of how the pace of that communication can happen out of courtesy of the personal phone call to close contacts. It may feel as though the urgency around the message for the entire campus is not as timely as one would like, but it will be made as soon as the phone calls are completed. And it is our desire to be as personal as possible with anyone who is identified as a close contact. Close contacts, of course, will be then required to quarantine for 14 days. Now, we believe that we can do as much in many of our transitions and settings to keep students as responsibly distanced as possible. So we anticipate that this can be a very limited impact for our school community. Nevertheless, want you to feel confident in how it will be handled. Now, of course, how this cascades from that initial positive diagnosis could take a lot of different shapes. And it's never going to have a broad sweeping generic response that I can provide. But let's look at a couple of scenarios. Quarantining of identified individuals could occur if any individual is in close contact with a person who reports a positive diagnosis. It's also possible that if it's a student, the person in front, behind, and to the left and to the right, if within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, would be automatically qualifying to quarantine. Now, quarantining an entire classroom is quite rare because we intend to have our seating assignments and a seating chart in each one of our classes, but an entire classroom of students could be directed to quarantine if it is determined that close contacts are difficult to decipher, or if the entire class was in close contact for some reason, or if supervision of students becomes compromised due to teacher quarantining requirements. And the quarantining of several classrooms follows the very same pattern. Now, the closing of a school will really only happen in total coordination with the Department of Public Health, as well as the medical advisors that we have convened in our community. And this will be really determined if a combination of new positives in the community, hospitalization rate in the community, and transmission rate in the school and the supervision of students is strained. And if that is the case, it could result in the closing of a school. Same could be true for a closing of a cluster of schools. And finally, the closing of a district, all 52 schools, could be directed, of course, by executive order, or it could be because the rate of new positives in the community has soared beyond our comfort level for a school to be continuing in combination with the transmission rate and hospitalization. So I say all of that to say that COVID-19 metrics are playing a key factor in how we evaluate the right timing in order to transition into the on-campus opportunity and option for students. I want to again navigate for you the COVID-19 dashboard that represents all of Henry County and is available on our website, as you can see here. If you start in the top left corner, what you really see is total cases. And when you hover over the total cases in Henry County, this is starting in the beginning of our tracking of COVID-19, and it will always increase. That's what a cumulative total will do. But if you go to the next box down, this is the 14-day new case rate per 100,000 people. What you can see is the very highest bar on that bar graph represents the date of July 17th. Coinciding with the date that this Board of Education determined the responsible start to the school year was to start remotely. But if you look at the very promising trend ever since that date, is that Henry County has been on a steady decline of new cases, and look at the most recent reporting week is starting to near the pre-July 4th holiday numbers. That is incredibly encouraging. And a more important number, potentially, is to look down one more, and this is the daily average of new positive cases. This is taking a look at, on average, how many new cases are being diagnosed out of the 239,000 plus people in Henry County on a daily basis. We are currently at a 16.14 daily average, and you can see the dramatic drop that even occurred again last week. Now, the Harvard Research review is really focusing on this number as a key indicator, because this is demonstrating that if you can stay below 25 per day, that is a very, per 100,000 individuals, a very, with risk mitigation, is a very appropriate place to be in order to open schools. And then I'll just finish up with saying that the new cases since last week as a raw count is 282, and that is 0.12% of our entire Henry County population with a new case last week. Now, we are only in this discussion about returning to on-campus because of the condition that COVID-19 is creating in our community. I think, like our community is experiencing, this board can see that the board made a very responsible decision on July 17th, but is probably in a great position right now to be discussing what our responsible return to campus should look like. The last thing I will share with you is what you will also see on our website, which is a actual positive tracker for the cases in Henry County schools. And when you click on that, you're going to actually see the raw count of positive cases of students, of staff, of non-personnel and visitors, and you'll also see the total number of individuals who are required to quarantine because they were exposed to someone who was positive within our schools. So last week, you can see that our total number of students, of course, we have athletes on campus. We also have our students who are in dual enrollment attending their college classes on the campus of the Advanced Academy. You can see the number of staff with positive, and you can also see the number of individuals who were required to quarantine because of those positives. For our staff right now who are on campus, maintaining 6 feet distance is essential in mitigating the spread of COVID, which also minimizes the quarantine impact. So the last thing I will mention is our community launch of Keeping Henry Healthy. Reopening our school campuses is for all of us to consider our role and responsibility to do our part to keep Henry healthy. We're asking everyone, wash up, watch your distance, wear a mask, monitor your health daily and stay home if you do not feel well, and please responsibly report, especially if you're a school professional, in your COVID positive diagnosis to your supervisor. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my section of the presentation, and I remain available for any discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Does any board member have any questions or comments? Dr. Nutt?
Thank you for this amazing work. When you said last week we'll have it together, I'm like, really? Okay. But you did it. That's amazing. I have a couple of questions. I noticed Monday and Tuesday go one day, and Thursday and Friday, depending on your name where it falls, goes a day. What about Wednesday? What happened to Wednesday?
So that will be a fully remote day for all students.
Okay.
And of course, the building is still open for pre-scheduled activities and appointment, and that could be customized by the local school if there's something specific to that school. But otherwise, it would be fully remote.
We have that we have that day on Friday, which has been amazing because you can, as teachers know, we always have meetings before school and meetings after school, and if you plan to do any planning, it's gone because of that. And that's what we're using our Fridays for, and to get work together. So that's awesome. Were all of our principals and support staff and everybody, were they polled or asked about? Have they seen this plan, and were they asked their opinions?
So this plan has, of course, been attached to the agenda in Assembly, but it really is the board's plan to review. It has not gone through an external vetting or feedback session. But I will say that we've had a lot of conversation with employees over the past week when the board did show favor to the gradual and staggered return framework, and specifically ask for a timetable to be put next to that framework. And so there, Mr. Schrum had focus group meetings with principals. Ms. Morris's team, starting today, has had focus groups with teachers. I believe more than 500 teachers are scheduled to participate in focus groups between today and tomorrow. We had a chance to talk with bus drivers and bus monitors, and have a focus group of bus drivers and bus monitors who met last week and coming back this week. And then each of the other chiefs have worked within their job families to poll our ASEP employees, our food and nutrition and school nutrition managers, as well as our counselors, social workers, and psychologists. So there's been just last week, an informal dialogue generated to get reaction to the framework and some sense and pulse about dates, but actually putting the plan in front of people has been brought to the board first for reaction.
I think my concern is, in July, we told everybody, hey, we're going remote. So everybody hunkered down and worked real hard and got their resources together. And now we're saying, okay, we're going to do both. I just don't want anybody to jump off the roof. Here we have another plan, but July was the right thing to do. July was just the right thing to do. And my point of saying that is, when we start, I don't want people to get upset when our COVID numbers start to go up, because anytime you have more contact with people, your numbers are more likely to go up. Is that right?
Well, I think it's hard for me to generalize that. I'd have to probably want to direct that to our Department of Public Health officials, but our mitigating efforts that are being put in place are the mitigating efforts being recommended by public health officials, and in all of the references that have been included in the presentation we really are right on target with our mitigating efforts. So I think that I think that we can do this safely, and I would not be bringing up the board a plan if I did not think we could take the next steps responsibly.
Well, I think the way you have it broken down, too, within schools, that it depends on what their rate is and how much it's going to impact the students. So I commend y'all for all your hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nutt. Mrs. Pope?
Yes, thank you. I think that this is so incredibly thorough, as I said last week, and I really think that this is the most responsible way that we can open up schools. And I know that some were ready on August 3rd and some are not ready yet. So I'm really grateful that our families still have the option to stay remote, and those who are ready can come back safely and responsibly. So I'm happy with this, and I'm really grateful for all of the work. It's truly amazing. Can I ask you when students return to the building, what is the cleaning going to look like in a classroom throughout the day?
Actually, Mrs. Pope, if I could ask Mr. Malcolm to give us an overview of the cleaning protocol that's been prepared.
Good afternoon. So the plan that we've come up with, that we've gone over a number of times in different town halls and things like that, is we're still working off of that plan, and it will be attached to the Phase 1 playbook that we presented back in the summer. So people will be able to read through what a typical day looks like. I will say in a classroom, there will be times throughout the day when disinfection happens on desk and chairs, and then high point areas, high touch areas such as light switches, doorknobs, and things of that nature. So you will see throughout the day when we are able to access those rooms, custodians going in there and doing disinfection. And then, of course, during our nightly clean, we will do the nightly clean activities that we've always done. In addition, we will do another disinfection at nighttime to get ready for the next day when they come in. So they're going to see a lot more disinfection. We've started that process now. With teachers coming back. We've had some teachers that are in the building now and staff. So we've done that, but it's really been on the high-touch areas. It hasn't involved the desk and chairs, but we have committed through the custodial plan to do those a few times during the day. So that will all be posted as a link on the Phase 1 playbook. If you'd like to know the complete custodial plan that involves other areas besides the classrooms, but there will be additional disinfection that's not happening right now because we don't have children sitting on the chairs and using their desk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you for coordinating with our custodians to ensure that that happens. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pope. Mrs. Edwards?
Thank you. I have several questions. The first one is for Mr. Malcolm.
Can't hear you.
Oh, it's on. Can you hear me?
You gotta get closer.
I'll just pull it closer. Okay. I have a question about the filters. I know last month, Mr. Malcolm, or the last time we were in here, Mr. Malcolm said the filters have been changed. Two questions. How often will they be changed? And or is there any chemicals that will be used to clean the filters or the AC units to cut down on the germs?
So, yes, the filters are being doubled. So we typically change filters every 9 weeks. We're going to double that. And in addition to that, we will be using chemicals to coil clean the HVAC units. So, yes, we typically... that will be doubled as well. So we're doing that, and we're changing the filter to a more robust filter than what we have currently used to help with some of the mitigation of particles in the air. So yes, all of our efforts are being doubled, and in addition to that, we are changing the filter to a more robust filter. Okay.
And Dr. Davis, this question I wanted to ask you. I know the office staff is highly concerned with parents coming in late to bring their children, and sometimes they're running late. They may not be running there without a mask on. And I don't know, I have not been in the school, so I don't know, are there plexiglass shields up to protect the office staff?
Each one of our offices have had plexiglass shields installed, but also seeing Mr. Schrum nodding, but each one of our schools has built a local school playbook to handle all of these typical routine transitions in ways that are much more structured and responsive to limiting the necessity for the coming in and out of the building. And so I also have a high level of confidence that schools and principals are thinking through what is our morning routine, what is our dismissal routine, and it may actually look differently for our schools than previous years have looked. Okay.
In the presentation that you presented, you said that the self-contained classrooms, students will be in the self-contained classroom in schools Monday through Friday. Did I hear that correctly? Could you give me just a few names of the self-contained programs?
Sure, I'd love to tag in Dr. Madden to give us some insight if you want to talk a little bit about our self-contained program areas.
A few examples of our self-contained classrooms are our ID classrooms, our autism classrooms, our emotionally behavior disordered classrooms. Those where you need more consistency and practice across the week, which will give them an opportunity versus just 2 days. And that was the thought behind that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Davis, would teachers outside of the Henry County school system be invited in to teach our evening K-5 classes?
That is not currently our model, nor do we anticipate a need for that model. All of our evening remote learning teachers are current Henry County Schools teachers.
Okay. And also, are there any ongoing considerations to improve safety precautions for on-campus learners returning? And if so, what are some of them?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Are there any ongoing considerations to continue to improve safety precautions for on-campus learners when they return? And if so, could you name a few precautions?
Yeah, so I do think that our meeting together last Monday allowed us to really elaborate that just because we've created district playbooks, we actually have each local school creating a local school playbook that is very granularly articulating how movement and routines throughout the building will be facilitated. So seeing one-way hallways and seeing bell schedules for lunch rotations to look quite differently, and really just seeing how students are scheduled in a school building could look differently. Now, I will say that there's a couple of things that have occurred that are really big deals that we have not even spent any time addressing. But first and foremost, the video cameras have been installed on our buses that the board invested in, as well as our new GPS system and our Here Comes the Bus app for all of our parents of students who will ride the bus. And so I hope you saw some buses rolling today, because my family got very excited when they saw buses rolling while we were testing out the Here Comes the Bus app. And our Centegix campus response system has successfully been installed in all 52 of our school campuses. And that is the all-campus alert system that allows every employee to have a specific notification and badge that will really provide a whole campus alert should there be an incident that requires assistance. And that is a commitment we made as a team 2 years ago that's actually installed and prepared to be delivered this school year. But when it comes to the additional mitigating efforts for mitigating the spread of COVID-19, we are going to be in a constant cycle of continuous improvement. We will have never arrived at the perfect scenario, and we will always seek ways to reasonably include the recommendations from professionals in varying work fields. We are learning a lot from what other districts have done in order to continue to evolve their mitigating efforts. And so we have a really strong, responsible step in the right direction, and we will continue to evolve and develop the right next steps as we get closer and work with more people in getting there.
Thank you. And my last question is, I know counselors are concerned about students returning to campus as well, and this is from a counselor, concerned about the reentry of the students. Well, how will it affect the counseling department? And I don't know if that's going to be left up to the leadership at the school, or is it something that's system-wide that's going to be put in place? Right now, the counselors are currently communicating with parents virtually and students also, and through Google Meets and Outlook bookings and via Google Voice as well as emails. How would the Henry County School System Counseling Department remain closed or continue to the protocols and procedures currently in place that was just named?
So I do want to acknowledge that each one of our counseling programs can have a level of uniqueness based on the school setting and the services that that counseling team is coordinating. But I would love Dr. Madden to provide any insight into what our counseling team is working through right now, what kind of training is going on right now.
Once again, we're going to basically follow the same process as far as appointments with schools. Any visitor that comes to a school outside of the students would make an appointment, and our students also set up appointments, and we would set the classroom up for advisement just as they would in a regular classroom setting. So we would basically follow those same processes that are outlined. If the school decides to go more specific in their playbook based on some individual needs, they will be able to make those adjustments as necessary, but we will move forward as planned like the remaining of the population. And then for those students who are remote, we will continue to set up virtual sessions and have accessibility for those students as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I would just like to say before I finish up is that I appreciate this return to this, the process to return to the school system, to the campuses. It's been well planned, well thought out, and I just want our parents to know they still have that option, just as you mentioned, Dr. Davis, for remote learning. For those parents who do not feel comfortable enough to send their children back to the campuses for learning face-to-face, that option, remote learning option, is still in place, and even as well as the evening school option as well. So those that are not feeling comfortable enough to send your children back, consider the remote learning option, that we're in that phase right now. But at some point, we have to get back to some normalcy, and we don't know when, what normal is going to look like from this point on. We just don't know, but we have to get back to some type of normalcy. And I feel good about this plan, Dr. Davis. I really do. And then one thing that I'm excited about, we are requiring masks. That's one thing that I'm really excited about because that's been my pet peeve for the last 3-4 months. And I'm glad to see that's in this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. Mrs. Cobb?
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. My connection's just a little bit unstable, but I appreciate being able to join the meeting today. I do want to say how much I appreciate all the hard work that has gone into making this recommendation, and I could not be more excited for our students to return to campus if that's what they choose to do. My question is around the mask policy that will be in place for those on campus. I know that's a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and I was just wanted to ask, is this something that other school districts are doing, or are we the only ones in the area who are requiring masks? I was just curious about that.
Actually, that's a great question, and there are a lot of school districts that have moved to requiring masks. Now, of course, we have some neighboring districts that have not announced their return to campus plans, but particularly some areas like Fayette are requiring masks, Gwinnett is requiring masks. We can see that Muskogee and Richmond County are requiring masks. Dougherty County is requiring masks, and of our sort of metro region, we do not see masks being required in Cherokee County, Forsyth County, or Paulding County at this time. They're just strongly recommended. And one more that is requiring it is Newton County. So I think you see really a mix, but a lot of movement towards the stronger language around masks. And we've been talking to districts in other parts of the country who are already back on campus and see a pretty prominent requirement in those other districts as well. So good question. Thank you, Mrs. Cobb.
Okay, thank you so much.
Is that it, Ms. Cobb? Okay. I too would like to just thank everybody that had a part in making this plan. It's such a comprehensive and robust plan, and just thank you. And I've always known, as a board member of the Henry County Board of Education, that we would definitely be ready when that time came, and I just want to thank everybody who had a part in that. But of that great plan, there's only one thing that I just want to publicly say. I actually do not agree with making masks mandatory, but for many different reasons. But that's only one small thing in such a comprehensive plan. I will support it, and I will support it because it's the recommendation of our superintendent, but I do not agree with making masks mandatory. Any other questions or comments from board members before we move on with the presentation?
I have I guess a question for Ms. Madden, Dr. Madden. When we said the special ed, because I teach resource class, will that also include the resource? Will that also include the resource class that will be going all week?
No, those are our students in self-contained classes.
I need my resource kids. Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Dr. Davis.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'd like to invite Ms. Sue Smith to the podium to talk through our return to work processes in Henry County Schools.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Madam Superintendent. So what does returning to work look like for our employees? We have been very fortunate as a school district to have afforded exceptional and unprecedented flexibility for our employees during the season of remote learning and working. As we transition to on-campus learning for those students who have opted to do so, routines and safeguards are in place to keep our educational communities healthy. Every employee has or will be provided face masks, a face shield, and sanitizing wipes for hands and surfaces. Each employee is required to follow established guidelines for returning to work, and the many facility adaptations and enhancements are in place to mitigate COVID-19 exposure. Additionally, our district-wide COVID-19 response protocols are very strong and very easy to understand. In addition to the many safeguards and precautions, Human Resources will be working directly with employees and their supervisors to determine who requires accommodations based on their own or their household family member's serious health condition that may be impacted by possible exposure to COVID-19. Requests for accommodations will be reviewed based on written restrictions submitted by the employee's healthcare provider and in conjunction with the most up-to-date CDC guidance. Approved accommodations will likely look different for each employee. So we don't really have a cookie cutter of what it's going to look like. It'll be based on restrictions. We will also be reviewing requests for child care leave if an employee has a child under the age of 18 whose school or child care provider has closed or is unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19, and they are still unable to secure child care. Principals and supervisors will have the request forms available at each work site. If restrictions cannot be accommodated, employees will continue to have options and will be informed of what alternatives they have available to them. You see a litany of acronyms up there. It could be Family and Medical Leave Act, or it could be the provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And under FFCRA is the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act. So we've got quite a few resources, quite a few acronyms that we can use to support our employees, and we will be sure to do that on a very thorough basis. We have created videos and supporting documents designed to fully inform employees about return to work expectations. So I'm sure there are district employees out there who are watching at this moment and wondering what comes next. So first, your supervisor will ensure that you get the opportunity this week to view the video, the return to work video, and the Keeping Henry Healthy video. This will be really critical. These are like 5-minute videos that really get into the weeds of understanding what returning to work is going to be all about. It is our expectation that most questions will be addressed through these videos, and as well as the district's playbooks found on the Henry County website, and the staff guidelines and expectations for returning to work document that will be provided. And that's the document on the right-hand side, and that's a double-sided document. Second, if there are work restrictions, employees should discuss them with their supervisor. And third, they should complete the appropriate paperwork and submit the appropriate required documentation to Human Resources for review and response. And while we know we cannot guarantee a COVID-free work environment, keeping our Henry County Schools employees and students healthy is certainly our priority as we welcome them back to our facilities. This completes my presentation. I turn it back to you, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Ms. Sue Smith. Mr. Chair, that concludes this section of the presentation. If the board has any interest in discussion, we're available, and we can move on to Dr. Blanton at the end of that.
Any questions or comments from board members for Mrs. Sue Smith? Mrs. Edwards?
Quite a few acronyms here. I know what family medical leave is, but with the others I'm not familiar with, probably like most of us. So say a person has been exposed, go back on campus and has been exposed. Which one of these would they apply for?
That's a great question. And essentially, if you look at the three, the FFCRA, EPSLA, EFMLEA, all of those are new. These are all based, when all this started, our government said, we need to make sure that our folks have sick leave provisions and that their employers provide those sick leave provisions. So if I have COVID or I test positive or I am quarantined, then I go under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And what that says is that that person gets 2 weeks of paid sick leave that does not come out of their own sick leave accrual. So that's really helpful. It's really beneficial. So that's where the EPSLA comes in. And then you have the EFMLEA, which is basically targeted at those who have child care issues. So I can't bring my child to grandma because she's been real sick, or my daycare down the street has closed. There are provisions through the EFMLEA. It does involve a reduced salary, but it is something that will at least keep people afloat while they're working through these issues.
So you say it does involve a reduced salary?
The EFMLEA does, but in terms of the employee exhibiting COVID symptoms, being tested for COVID, or quarantining under COVID, they are at least guaranteed those full pay 10 days.
Okay.
So that they don't have to use their own sick leave.
Okay, so what about the FFCRA?
So the FFCRA is basically the umbrella. It's basically the bigger, they just put everything under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and then talk about the two other acronyms under there. So it's legislation that was passed.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. Any other questions or comments? Dr. Nutt?
So if we have an employee that does not really fall under any of this, but decides they would rather do virtual learning, will they have the option to do that, or will they have to come back on campus?
That's a great question. We want everybody back on campus. However, if your physician, your healthcare provider says you have these particular restrictions, and this is what it needs to look like for this employee, then we will work with them on those accommodations. May not default originally or at the onset to remote working. We might try some other things first, but remote working can be an option ultimately if the restrictions lead us that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sue Smith. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Dr. Blanton to approach the podium for the third section of our presentation, but as he does, I want to mention that this is really about the return to campus for our professionals, not return to work, since they have been working absolutely some of the most intensive responsibilities ever. So, but we also know exactly what we're talking about, Ms. Sue Smith, as we're bringing our professionals back to campus. All right, Dr. Blanton.
Dr. Blanton.
Okay,
there you go.
Got it on. Good afternoon again, and thanks for the opportunity to share the process for how parents and guardians will go about selecting an option to either remain in remote learning, to choose the option for on-campus learning, and then also to share the communication plan around all of this in the process. I'll start with how the district will communicate all of this to our parents and our families, because this will help us kind of walk through the parent-guardian selection process. So our primary method of communication will be to use the messenger tool in our student information system, Infinite Campus. And this will send out messages followed by phone messages to each of our parents and our guardians. But of course, we'll also feature the process prominently on the district and our school's web pages, and we'll also share this through our various social media channels. The communication will direct parents and guardians to the selection form, which will be available within their campus portal account. So the good news here is that because of our digital back-to-school paperwork process, most of our parents now have portal accounts or are in the portal. But for those who still need to set that up, they can simply click the Get Connected link for Campus Portal that's conveniently located on our main district webpage, as you can see here. And then from here, parents can enter some basic information to confirm their identity and get the code that's going to be necessary to create their parent portal account. So for our parents who are already using Campus Portal, they can click the link that will be included in the communication that they're going to receive this evening, or they can get there from the Parent and Student Campus login link, which we have up here, which is also conveniently located on the front page of the main district website. The selection form will ask some basic questions related to the student's identity, and of course it's also going to ask for their selection for remote learning or to continue or to move to on-site option, and then a couple of questions relating to things like transportation and whether they will participate in the after-school enrichment program, and it's about that simple. So the form will be available beginning this evening and will remain active through the end of September 9th, ending on midnight of the 9th. So this afternoon, we just really wanted to provide you with a quick overview of the selection process for parents, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to do so. So Superintendent Davis, that concludes what I prepared.
Thank you, Dr. Blanton. Mr. Chair, that concludes what we have prepared, but remain available for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Blanton. Mrs. Edwards, do you have a question?
Yes.
Comment?
I remember when the system went remotely, and the parents had a choice. They were trying to log on to choose, if they were going to remotely or if they want to come face to face. So I hope the site is much more friendlier now, that parents won't have the problems that they had earlier regarding trying to locate the information. So I hope the site is much more friendlier now for the parents.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure.
I wasn't sure if it was a question.
Yeah, I'm not sure what.
Well, I'm really making a statement for the parents. I know parents had a problem. Some parents had a problem trying to navigate through the system, the website, to find the site that they needed to find or the location they needed to find to choose whether it was going to be remote or in class, face-to-face. And that's what I'm asking. This is just a statement, really, to you. I just hope that the site is user-friendly so the parents won't have a problem trying to navigate through the site to find the information they need to register their children or to let us know which way they're going to be, which one they're choosing, face-to-face or remote.
Well, I think this helps us underscore that it is actually a different process. Now that it is in school season and students have had to go to the Infinite Campus parent portal to do all of the back-to-school paperwork that used to be mounds and mounds and mounds, it's all now transitioned to a digital environment. Families who have successfully completed that will now find the same process to be in that same Infinite Campus portal. Over the summer, we did not have enrolled students. And so we were relying on a different and less sophisticated technical solution. Now we have enrolled students. The process can go through our Infinite Campus system, and I think that can be maybe more familiar for a lot of families to navigate, and for new families to our organization, they just did so to complete their paperwork. And then the last thing I'll say is the email. I believe there'll be an email distributed through Infinite Campus. So if you have not registered your email address in the parent portal, then you may be missing out on some communication opportunity. And that link that will be sent tonight in that email will be a direct link into everything that Dr. Blanton just demonstrated. So I think that we've made a more sophisticated solution, and if any individual has any challenges, we would certainly want them to seek out school or district personnel for assistance.
Right. And it also brings with it other advantages and efficiencies when a parent makes a selection in this process. Because it is in our student information system, then that's actually going to initiate the technical process by which a student's placed in the right group, either remote or back in the on-campus option, right, or the evening option. So as a parent makes a selection, then it actually technically places them in that group. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Ms. Pope?
Yes, thank you. Having been through the online registration process and then watching this, I just wanted to say thank you, because it is like, this looks so simple, and it is. It's really just remarkable what you all have been able to pull off to make these things accessible to our family. So thank you so much. And I know that, the online registration was it just was such a breeze. So I'm just really, really appreciative that this is so accessible and easy to find for our families.
It actually utilizes that online registration tool. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Blanton. Any other questions or comments? All right, and that's the end of that presentation, correct? Thank you. We'll now move into the next section of the agenda, which we'll be taking action on this afternoon, which is Section C, our business items for tonight or this afternoon. C1, back to school, scenario 1 with the timeline. You've heard the recommendation from the superintendent. Do I have a motion to approve C1?
I move we approve C1.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on C1? All in favor, please raise your hand. I was just checking on Ms. Cobb over there. All right, that's a 5-0 approval of C1. And I believe, is that all the business we have before us? All right, if that's all the business, this special call meeting of the Henry County Board of Education is now adjourned.